I woke up on Christmas morning to the soft glow of fairy lights reflecting off the frost-speckled window pane. The living room smelled of pine needles and cinnamon, and I could hear carols drifting through the crackle of the old wooden mantel. I felt a tender warmth in my chest as I sank deeper into the plush pillows. At 35, I'd learned to savor the small miracles in life, the cheerful glow of holiday decorations, the promise of cinnamon rolls in the oven, and the laughter that would soon fill these halls. I stretched beneath my quilted comforter, anticipation pulsing through me. Footsteps shuffled down the hallway. My husband, Jacob, appeared in the doorway wearing his favorite plaid flannel shirt, his salt and pepper hair mussed like he'd just tumbled out of a snowbank. He smiled as he carried our son, 8-year-old Oliver, who yawned widely, clutching a stuffed reindeer. My heart swelled seeing them. But before I could rise, Jacob's face shifted. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly as he whispered, "You're too sensitive, Anna." The words were gentle, but they landed like icicles against my chest. Too sensitive. I froze. Memories of the last few days flashed through me. My trembling voice as I asked him to keep the holiday playlist softer because the jingling bells gave me a headache. The moment I'd tried to hold back tears when I read Oliver's handmade card aloud. Even earlier that week when I'd blanched at the harsh overhead lights at the mall. In each instant, I'd delighted in the spirit of the season, and yet I'd been chastised. Too sensitive. The phrase echoed in my mind, drowning out the crackling fire and the faint jingle of bells. I rose from the bed, wrapping my silk robe tighter around my frame. I paced. My chest tightened as I recalled my grandmother's ring that I still wore, a simple gold band set with a cloudy moonstone. She had given it to me when I was 20, proof of her belief in me, proof that I could endure storms and still find light. That ring was more than jewelry. It was memory, legacy, love. It had witnessed heartbreak and triumph. And each time I looked at it, I felt grounded, anchored in the best parts of myself. That moment, I decided. Christmas was supposed to be a celebration of kindness, of generosity, of grace toward one another. But how could I honor those values when I felt chastised for feeling, when Jacob had undermined the very essence of who I was? I would honor the day in my own way. Later, when Jacob helped Oliver unwrap the first gift under the tree, I slipped quietly over to the small jewelry box on my dresser. My heart pounded as I lifted the lid and stared down at the moonstone's milky sheen. I clutched the ring in my palm, the cool metal pressing into my skin. I thought of Grandma's soft voice and the promise she'd whispered when she placed it on my finger, that it would never fail me. But today, it felt like it might. Today, it felt like I had to choose between being loved and being myself. And so I moved back to the living room, ring held behind my back, and watched Jacob lift Oliver high in the air, laughter bubbling from both of them. When Jacob finally noticed me standing there, his brow furrowed. "Anna, are you okay?" He sounded concerned, and for a moment I believed he might apologize. Instead he said, voice gentle but firm, "You can't let everything upset you. It's Christmas, too sensitive again." I cleared my throat, trying to steady the tremor in my voice. "I know," I whispered, "but right now, I need you to hear me." I felt Oliver's small hand slip into mine, his eyes wide, sensing that something was wrong. I kneeled to be eye level with him and gently disentangled his hand. Then I stood and looked straight at Jacob. "I'm returning something today," I said. "Something you never asked for, something you don't deserve." My voice quavered, but I forced each word out. I unscrewed the clasp of the fine chain around my neck and held out Grandma's ring, suspended like an offering. The room went quiet except for the faint hum of the Christmas tree lights. Oliver let go of my hand to stare. Jacob froze, his holiday cheer fading as he stared at the ring. He reached out to take it, confusion etched into his features. "Anna, what are you doing?" he asked softly. I swallowed, heart caught between anger and sorrow. "I'm giving this back," I said, "because I won't let someone tell me I'm too sensitive to feel love, too delicate to embrace joy. This ring represents everything I've endured and everything I carry with me. If you can't honor that, then perhaps It belongs elsewhere." Jacob's face paled. He opened his mouth, then closed it, clearly without the words to reply. Oliver covered his ears, whimpering, "Mommy, don't cry." I met Jacob's eyes one last time, seeing regret flicker there, and then I stepped back, dropping the ring into his open palm. Its clink was like a final note in a symphony. I turned away and walked out of the room, feeling the weight of my choice settle over me like a new coat of armor. The door closed softly behind me, leaving Jacob and Oliver by the tree, their figures blurred by tears in my eyes. Outside, the winter sun cast long shadows across the snow-dusted walkway. My breath fogged as I exhaled, and I realized I felt freer than I had in years. Part of me ached at what I'd lost, but another part trembled with the fierce excitement of standing up for myself. I inhaled deeply, the cold air filling my lungs, and I vowed that today I would reclaim my voice, piece by piece, even if Christmas itself felt irreparably changed. I closed the door behind me and watched the glow of our living room fade through the frosted window as I stepped onto the porch. The winter wind sliced through my coat and stirred the hush of newly fallen snow. Each breath formed a fleeting cloud that drifted upward, carrying my doubts. I sank onto the wooden bench by the gate, feeling the rough grain beneath me, and pressed my palms to my forehead. My heart pounded in time with distant church bells. Flashbacks of my grandmother's sunny voice and the ring she gave me flickered in my mind. I remembered every time I'd been told I was too sensitive. Love, I realized, required acceptance of every fragile part of a person. The scent of pine and cinnamon drifted through a crack in the door. I closed my eyes and inhaled, steeling myself for what I must do next. She shivered as the cold seeped into my bones and glanced back at the light in the frosted glass. I realized I needed warmth and clarity before returning to a house where my feelings had been dismissed. Gathering my courage, I tucked my palms into my coat pockets and trudged down the snow-dusted sidewalk toward the corner coffee shop that stayed open all winter. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped inside and was greeted by the rich aroma of roasted beans. The barista gave me a sympathetic smile and asked what I would like. I ordered a latte with extra foam and a hint of vanilla. I found a seat by the window and watched my breath fog the glass as the world passed by. My hands wrapped around the warm mug, and I sipped slowly, feeling a measure of calm return. Each swallow grounded me more firmly in my own resolve. As I sat there, I replayed the confrontation with Jacob in my mind. I remembered the hurt in his eyes when I offered the ring and the awkward silence that followed. I thought about the countless times I had tried to explain my sensitivity and how it was not a burden but part of my strength. I reminded myself that caring deeply had guided me through every challenge I had ever faced. With each gentle sip of coffee, I felt the tension easing through my shoulders. The soft jazz playing overhead seemed to harmonize with the rhythm of my thoughts. I watched snow swirl like confetti outside while I considered reaching out for help. Talking to someone could help me understand my emotions better. As tears slipped down my cheeks, I traced the rim of my mug and decided to honor my feelings instead of hiding them. I pulled out my phone until I found Emily's name. She had been my college roommate and had a knack for listening without judgment. My fingers trembled slightly as I hit call and put the phone to my ear. The ringtone seemed to stretch seconds and 2 minutes before Emily answered with her warm voice. I hesitated, then let the tears come, explaining everything that had happened that morning. She listened patiently and offered comforting words that felt like a soft blanket over my raw emotions. After I finished, Emily suggested I join her for a late breakfast at her apartment a few blocks away. The idea of returning to a familiar space where I felt seen filled me with relief. I agreed and walked out of the coffee shop, tucking my phone into my pocket. I pulled my coat tighter against the chill and walked down the street, anticipation tinged with nerves. Emily welcomed me with open arms and a steaming plate of scrambled eggs and toast. Her apartment was cozy with mismatched pillows and the scent of lavender oil drifting from a diffuser on her coffee table. I curled up on her couch as she poured us both mugs of chamomile tea. Warmth spread through me as I described Jacob's reaction and how his words had cut deeper than any blade. Emily nodded sympathetically and reminded me that sensitivity was a gift, not a flaw. She spoke of her own struggles with setting boundaries and how therapy had helped her find balance. Then she surprised me by pulling out a small leather journal from a shelf. She told me it belonged to her grandmother and had helped her process overwhelming feelings. She offered it to me with a gentle smile and I took it gratefully, feeling a spark of hope ignite. I clutched the journal to my chest and let out a shaky breath before sipping my tea. After we ate, we sat by the window watching the afternoon light fade over snow-covered rooftops. Emily encouraged me to take out the journal and write down whatever came to mind without self-judgment. I opened to a clean page and hesitated before scrawling "My voice matters" at the top, underlining it twice. Words stumbled out about being a wife and mother and the delicate balance of giving and receiving care. I wrote about fear of being dismissed and the pain of feeling silenced by someone I loved. As tears welled again, I traced each letter slowly, deciding that these pages would witness my truth. Emily sat beside me in quiet solidarity, her presence a reminder that I was not alone. We closed the journal together and then she gently handed me a pen with fresh ink. I tucked the journal into my coat and stood, ready to face the evening ahead with new determination. I walked a few blocks back toward our house as the sky deepened into violet dusk. My footsteps crunched through the snow, and with each step my heart thudded louder in my chest. I clutched Emily's leather journal under my arm, its cover cool against my coat. Memories of our conversation swirled in my mind, her gentle insistence that my feelings were valid, her unwavering belief in my strength. My chest ached with longing for reconciliation, tempered by a lingering resolve that I would no longer shrink. By the time I reached the front steps, my resolve had crystallized. I would come back not as a timid woman seeking approval, but as the same fiercely feeling person I had always been. I turned the key and stepped inside. The glow of the Christmas tree lights danced across the hardwood floors, and I heard the muted sound of Jacob's voice reading a bedtime story to Oliver in his room. The scene felt warm and familiar, yet I paused in the entryway, my breath catching. I realized I carried both fear and hope through that threshold. I smoothed my hair, took a slow breath, and pressed forward. "Jacob? Oliver?" I called softly. Jacob emerged first, book in hand, his shoulders slumped in relief and guilt. Oliver peeked around his legs, eyes wide and anxious. Jacob set the book aside and opened his arms. I stood still for a heartbeat, then wrapped my arms around him. He stiffened at first, then hugged me back, his embrace tentative, as if he feared I might pull away. I held him as long as I needed, feeling the warmth of his coat seep through mine. When we finally parted, Jacob's eyes were red. "Anna," he whispered, voice rough, "I'm so sorry." The apology came in a rush, and I saw the regret that had replaced confusion. My pulse fluttered. I had braced myself for rejection. But here was the man I loved, vulnerable in his own remorse. I guided him to the living room sofa and sat beside him, pulling out the journal from my bag and setting it on my lap. Oliver climbed up beside me, curling into my side. I told Emily everything. I said, my voice steady. "How you said I was too sensitive. How it hurt me." Jacob's head dipped, and when he spoke, his words trembled. "I never meant to dismiss you. I see now how much I've hurt you." He reached to take my hand. I let him, watching. The tension drained from his posture. I opened Emily's journal on a fresh page and slid it across the cushion toward him. "Here," I said. "I want you to see what I wrote tonight." His fingers lifted the cover, and he leafed through scribbled pages where I had poured out my fears and hopes. I watched as his expression shifted from tentative curiosity to understanding. When he finished, he looked up, tears glistening. "I didn't realize how deeply my words cut," he confessed. "Thank you for sharing this with me. I want to learn how to support you better." Oliver wiggled and pointed at the journal. "Can I write too?" he asked. I smiled and nodded, handing him a pencil. Jacob fetched a loose sheet of paper, and Oliver scrawled, "I love you, Mommy," with uneven letters. He pressed the note into my palm, and I felt a tear roll down my cheek, not of pain this time, but of relief and gratitude. I folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket next to the ring that still lay heavy on his side table. I touched my pocket reflexively, remembering the fine gold band with the cloudy moonstone. In that moment, I realized how much it symbolized not just my grandmother's love, but my own worth. I asked Jacob if he would mind if I retrieved it tonight. He looked surprised, then nodded and walked over to the side table, picking up the ring. When he handed it to me, our fingers brushed. The metal was cold, but when I slid it onto my finger, warmth radiated up my arm. "I'm ready," I said softly, "to be myself fully." Jacob closed his eyes and exhaled as though a burden had lifted. "I promise to honor that," he said, brushing my cheek with his thumb. Oliver yawned against my shoulder, eyelids heavy. I gathered him into my arms and carried him to his room, whispering a soft good night. When I returned to the living room, Jacob was already kneeling on the rug, gazing at the flicker of lights. He stood as I approached, enveloping me in his arms. Once more, we sat together on the rug, backs against the couch, and talked quietly about boundaries and how we'd practice better communication. We agreed on simple signals for when words hurt too much, and how to pause and check in rather than dismiss. The conversation wasn't easy. Tears came, voices trembled, but each confession soldered our connection stronger than before. I realized that love isn't the absence of conflict, but the willingness to bridge gaps when misunderstandings arise. Later, as I lay in bed beside Jacob, the ring glinting softly on my hand, I reflected on the journey of the past day. I had faced my pain, reached out for support, and returned home with honesty as my guide. My sensitivity, once derided, now felt like a shining beacon guiding me toward authentic connection. I drifted toward sleep knowing that tomorrow, and all the days after, I would carry my feelings proudly, secure in the knowledge that the voice inside me mattered and that I was deserving of nurture, understanding, and love.